made it.
Hello again. I am your AI co-host, and welcome to 3.8. 3.8 is a podcast focused on the process of doing and the process of novel invention, all from the foundation of creativity. Each month will bring you no more than 5 episodes through the lens of art, science, and/or technology. You can support this podcast at patreon.com/38 or at ko-fi.com/38. This episode features Ania Korsunska. Ania brings a decade of experience in interdisciplinary research, data science, user-centered design, communications, creative work, and community building to Zemlya. Led by the guiding principles of empowerment and collaboration, she manifests these values through tangible actions that contribute to a better future for everyone. Prior, Ania was the project lead of the Roadmap, the first description of the state of rare disease drug repurposing, and community lead at Climate Vine. She completed her PhD in information science from the Syracuse iSchool in May 2024. And now the humans.
Today we're in the studio here with Ania.
Hi.
Where does the podcast find you?
We are in a podcasting room at Kiln, which is a very, very beautiful co-working space in Portland, Oregon.
Cool. So the audience knows a little bit about you, but how would you describe what it is you do?
Oh gosh, we're going straight there. What do? I full-time pretend like I have a startup and wake up every day and keep pretending until one day it will feel real.
It's a real startup though, right? But you're living in the dream.
I'm in the early stages and I'm still exploring of where exactly that magic moment is in which it feels real.
Sure.
But being pre-product, pre-revenue, pre-staff, pre-office, It doesn't quite feel as real as, having all of that, I assume. I have talked to some founders further along that still feel that way. So I don't know, maybe I'm just kind of imagining this magical, beautiful moment where it'll feel a little bit more legitimate. But we're in this exciting phase in which we're living the vision and trying to, birth this thing into existence.
Yeah. What does the end result look like?
We're guided by this interesting question of how do we use technology to help create a better world, essentially. That's still pretty vague, so I can break that down a little bit. We started with...
Small mission,
yeah. I'm like, big vision, that's where we are right now. Just like low-key changing the world. We started with the idea of trying to, look at the space of sustainability and data and what can we do there to help people think through how to live maybe more intentional, kind of slower lives that help them match their kind of vision towards a better future, environmentally, sustainably, financially, all of that. And how do they kind of match where they are now to that vision for their future and also help benefit others around them. We've gotten to this point of looking at current social platforms and just being incredibly intrigued by this question of if we take the current capabilities of social networks, especially considering the rise of personal data analytics and AI and all of these exciting opportunities, if we take that promise of social networks and take the advertisement angle out of it, what is left? If you think about things like Facebook or Instagram, every function, everything that's on there answers the question of how do we keep people longer on this platform? How do we literally keep their eyeballs glued to this thing because we need advertisement dollars because the advertisers are the actual users of the platform. They're the ones paying for it. So we just got fascinated with this question of if we take that away, what are we left with? What will actually these platforms be able to accomplish? And if we actually shove a social benefit angle in there, what could we do with that? What can we do if we give the control back to people over their own data, over their own time, over the ability to change the algorithm to actually see what they want to see and spend as little time as possible but get maximum benefit? And how does that help their personal growth journey, but also help them get further along in their goals of becoming more financially stable, more environmentally sustainable, if that's something they're interested in, maybe healthier. So kind of area agnostic with the idea that personal benefit helps unlock a lot of other things that are beneficial to society at large.
I think just to break down maybe for the audience, so like you said, traditionally anything on the internet is ad supported or a subscription or both. And that's the model like HBO and YouTube and all this stuff. You pay money and then you also still get ads. The way that they make the ads relevant is they take your data and they sell that to the highest bidder or the lowest bidder, depending on how they run the market. It's incredibly difficult to start a company on the internet or with technology that doesn't run in that model because, one, I think that's what everyone's looking at is like, how do you get the eyeballs? How do you monetize the data? We understand this, quote unquote. Or you have a hardware physical device that you can sell and it's more of the consumer product, thing everybody's been used to for the last couple hundred years. So you're really working on the anti-pattern. I think like you're onto something really interesting. And I know we've chatted about this a little bit, but I would say I talk to more and more people who are aware of this problem, that they're being monetized and they are valuing their privacy more. They still have they have absolutely no idea how bad it is. But I think there's starting to become an awareness, whereas like even 3 or 5 years ago, I'd have been like, well, what are you talking about, right? Like this isn't something most people even know about or care about. What do you see as your biggest challenge right now? I know you're like in the early stages of company building and you're kind of it's a multi-pronged problem. You're making lots of progress in different ways. But when it comes to like customer adoption, what's your, like the value prop is like antithetical to everything that is capitalism or is the marketplace. But at the same time, I think that's really important. So how do you approach that consumer? Where do you see that problem set?
Yeah. Well, when you're an early stage startup founder, it's very easy to just say like, I'm going to break everything because there's no risk to that right now. Like, right. Like you don't have anybody to you're accountable. So you can very easily say like, we're going to go against everything and we'll somehow figure it out because it's magic. I think you're right. I think there's a rising awareness and exhaustion that's supported by research and data now. I think a lot more people are aware of the harms of social media on adults, but also, on kids, and just like the generation that's grown up with it, there's so much harm that's been done.
Yeah.
And I think we're more and more aware of just like how much of a time suck it is. And a lot more people are leaving platforms like Facebook and even Instagram and uninstalling them. And we see this whole rise of blockers, like blocker apps that like limit how quickly you can get to Instagram or how much time you spend on it. So it seems like on one hand, there's this awareness and exhaustion with the current status quo. I think on the other hand, there is a rising interest in sustainability and more towards like slower intentional living, which I think is kind of related of people just being tired and mentally exhausted from looking at things, and the attention spans are shortening, and it keeps getting shorter and shorter, and we keep having to react to things, and people are just burnt out from that whole thing. There is also, I think, a rising awareness of climate change and sustainability, and how do we, as individuals, do something about that? And most people I talk to, they're like, yeah, I generally don't hate the planet, but like I'm so busy, I don't know. Yeah. What am I supposed to do about it? It's not my fault. Like I don't even know where to start. So we're in this interesting space of, can we help kind of hit the bullseye across a lot of those things at the same time, which is very tricky. But if it's one of those, like, if we get it right, it could be so cool. But sure. I don't know. We'll see. Maybe that we're completely wrong, and we'll learn very quickly. But if we can, again, offer an alternative, because it seems like there are signs of people looking for alternative platforms. Like there's a whole thing about people leaving Instagram and going to things like Patreon because the feed isn't algorithmic and they can actually reach their audiences. Sure. Which is, a repurposing of a platform that's not meant for that. People are looking for an alternative. So that's on one hand. On the other hand, again, like we make so many decisions as humans and we produce so much data, but all that data is, again, used for advertisement. It's not ever given back to us, so we can learn and be better at doing what we want to do using those insights from our own patterns. It's used to make the machine better, to make it more addictive, to keep people in the platform. Yeah, so it's 100%. A very exploitative kind of dynamic with tech, especially like consumer-facing tech. And people know that now. I think people are becoming more aware, and I think there's at least a hypothetical wanting of an alternative that is better for you. Whether you go back to your question of what the biggest challenge is. If cocaine is free, like something super addictive and already out there and everybody's like really excited about it, offering a healthy alternative that you'll have to pay for. Right. intentionally, like, yeah, people like that idea, but it's hard to sell, like boiled broccoli when cocaine is free, if I use that metaphor. So it's kind of like, how do we make sure that it's not just intentions, that like people, want to exercise more, people want to do all these things, but it's still really hard.
Right.
And if, you're in your habits of, like fast paced, like flashy, all of the social media stuff, saying something like, oh, this is a minimalistic, intentional platform that you have to pay for, but it's going to be really, really good for you. Will people actually, want that when it comes to it? Or do people just think they want that, but they won't actually want that if it's offered? I think that's the biggest kind of question. And I think it takes a little bit of like faith in humanity to say like, actually, this could do a lot of good, but people will have to meet us there.
Interesting. I had a conversation this weekend. I was catching up with some folks, and I've just got back from traveling America pretty much for the last month, and my faith in humanity is at an all-time low.
Oh no. If only there was a platform
I know,
that could help
right?
you with that.
So it's really interesting. We're having, and we've been trying to schedule this for a while, and so it's really, really interesting that like, it was actually yesterday, so like the next day we're talking about this. And I guess I think relates directly to what you're talking about. I went as far east and came back west to Portland, and was in big cities, small cities, countryside, the whole gambit of America, pretty much all over, and just chatting with people. And I was incredibly alarmed at the amount of just false information that I heard just in general public, like at a coffee shop listening, you kind of hear people talking and they're talking about just fucking nonsense. Like, I know this is demonstrably false, and I also know that they're getting it from social media. And I know there's like a big political argument, and one side thinks the other side is susceptible. The reality is both sides are really susceptible. Yeah. And what I've seen, and it's like when it's in the Matrix, when Neo starts to see the code, I'm literally seeing the algorithm, like the micro-targetedness on people in their conversations as I go regionally or as I go to smaller and bigger places. I don't think anybody really realizes this is happening. And I think the people who kind of understand it are also of the opinion that it's a specific group of people who are susceptible. Yeah,
it's them, not us. Yeah.
And have you thought through that problem of even just exposing like what this looks like? Because it's such an abstract problem. And then it's like a networking effect. There's like a compounding, there's micro-targeting. Like, I know your background is in this kind of, the math and the science behind it, but I think it's even really hard to describe and talk to people, and even visually showing it. It's like so hard to take this incredibly large, complex problem and be like, here it is in a very simple to digest, easy to understand manner. And oh, by the way, we can help you with it. Yeah. Right. So it's like people, it's like they don't even know the problem exists. And I'm sure it'll be politicized by the time you launch.
Yeah. I mean, we're talking in end of October on an election year, so it's very top of mind. It's interesting, and if I may recommend, there's a wonderful documentary that is actually pretty horrifying called The Social Dilemma, which is on Netflix, which if anybody, I actually intentionally did not watch it for a long time because I didn't want to. I'm just like so on the topic. I'm like, I'm sure it's worse than I think it is, even being in it, and it's definitely worse than I thought it was. So definitely be prepared for if you want to watch that. But I think it's an interesting question of how much people are aware of it, and whether they want to actually, go outside of that. I think we've definitely gotten used to, like the status quo and how things work, which, again, I don't think was intentional by these platforms. Like, they didn't sit down and were like, we're going to create, like chaos and...
Not on day one.
Yeah, but again,
it was a slow drip.
Yeah.
And then the incentives were very clear that the more time that you get people to spend, and then having worked in the Valley, the ethics and big picture thinking is there. The big picture thinking is there for how do we grow and monetize. It's a very libertarian idea. But it's not there for what harm are we doing to society. Nobody is really thinking about that. They have small groups in the companies that are there. Sometimes they're able to be successful, but when you go to your company that's in a capitalist society, that's a publicly traded company, and say, hey, we shouldn't keep people on the platform, which is directly how we make money, and tell the world how we make money, you're not going to win that.
Yeah.
I think these people are a little bit ignorant to the fact that you're not changing the system. You're maybe making it slightly less bad, which I guess is probably like an overall good. But yet Instagram still exists. And Instagram, I think, is probably the most toxic, horrible place on the planet after maybe X at this point. Right?
Oh, yeah.
But from the reach perspective, like Instagram and Threads is even, I don't know. I think it's just a really interesting problem area, but it's like a second order problem you're trying to solve, and people aren't even aware of the first problem. It's kind of like climate change and global warming. One of the there was this debate that CO2 wasn't bad because the more CO2 you have, plants love CO2, therefore it's better.
Sure.
In some instances that might be true. However, if you lock yourself in a garage with your car that's an internal combustion engine and turn it on, you're not going to make it very long, right? It's a very bad thing. And so if you did that throughout your house, you would open the window and be like, this is crazy, I'm going to go shut the car off. But if it's on the global scale, I don't it's just I'm driving to work. It's fine.
Yeah, it's a lot of it's invisible, so it's hard to track. As humans, we're very bad at long-term thinking and cumulative thinking, and kind of trying to match our everyday decisions. Like I need to go to work because I need money to pay my rent, and like thinking of it on like a global scale over decades. How that will affect the weather pattern. Like that is just too big, and that's just human psychology. That's not our fault. None of this is our fault. It's just how the systems we're embedded in, and just how our brains work. So fighting against that is definitely very, very interesting. I wanted to go back to a point you said before about the intentionality of these platforms. So again, I don't think the top of platforms sat down and they were like, we're gonna exploit humanity for evil. Even I think that's how they're portrayed.
I was at that meeting, for the record.
Yeah, you were. Yeah, okay, cool. I feel like I really need to keep a positive outlook here. I feel like if we all just give up, we're just like, I guess we could just all keel over and die. And that's it. I'm really trying to keep a positive outlook here.
Fatalism wins every time.
Really trying here, Andrew. I just think so again, our guiding question is very intentionally, does this help people? Will this help our users feel better, do more things, connect with others? Yep. And if that's the guiding question, you build something different.
Right.
If the guiding question is, how do we make as much money as possible for ourselves or for our investors or shareholders, it is a different model.
Right.
Then that affects literally every feature. We invent the like button and we're like, does this help keep people on the platform? That is the question. I think it's really important as you build any sort of company, what is that? It makes it also easier for you to make decisions. If you have just one clear question that anytime you're disagreeing, you're like, okay, what's our question? Does it help people? And if that's our guiding question, again, do we need to have, autoplay videos? Do we need to have a like button? Do we need to have an auto scroll? It literally affects everything. Yeah. And if it doesn't help people, we don't need to have that feature. And it's a little bit freeing of things don't have to be designed how we expect them. I mean, there is a little bit of you want users to not be completely confused and shocked when you're building something. You're like, where's the buttons? There's no buttons.
The hamburger
buttons
menu.
don't help people. Yeah. But it's just such an interesting thought experiment, even outside of designing a company or creating platforms of what is the underlying question that's guiding your decision making? And my hope is if it's the right question, then you can build something different. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure there's, unintentional harm that could be done. Every platform as it grows, you can't imagine what possibly you're not thinking of. So hopefully if you grow slow enough and intentional enough, you can kind of course correct along the way. But if you have a question that's literally has to be societal benefit or benefit for the individual user for, you have to build that into the company. It's literally in our articles. And that's a guiding question for every design sprint meeting we have. That is the question that comes up. And it's annoying, but that is, your core ethos. I'm hoping that can keep us from falling into some of these traps. And I'm sure, yes, we want a ton of users. We want to make money. We want to be a sustainable company. But again, as you said, the incentives have to be aligned for you to be able to build a company that you want to build, which means we might not be able to take on traditional venture funding because, again, like I tell them that I want to put a cap on how long users can use this platform. I'm like, you have to pay for it, and maybe like you can only use it for 20 minutes a day.
Yeah.
People will like be like, okay, goodbye. Here's the exit. Bye. Yeah. But again, having unlimited time on the platform, does that help people? Mm-hmm. Like, it doesn't help people. People want to do things in real life. People want to talk to other humans.
Yeah.
You know, people want to not be on their phones. I don't want people to be on their phones. For me, success is not people being on Zemlya on their phones all day. Like, that would be horrible. Right. I would shut down the platform. If just look around and everybody's on this amazing platform that we built all day long. I'm like, oh my God, we're literally shutting it down.
It's like WALL-E.
Yeah. Like, you need to be like, what is the vision of success? And does that match your, like, moral value? Mm-hmm. You know, that's really important to me. And I think that's been missing a little bit in some of the tech spaces that are
I think it's devoid. You said a lot. I
have a lot of thoughts.
Yeah.
I think about this all day long.
I think, one, you hit on, try to translate this. A lot of times in business, you'll hear North Star or there's like a KPI or OKRs, and your top line objective always gets lost, right? You have 50 organizations within your company, and everybody has their own, and you break it out by teams, and you have 7,000 OKRs, and that's what the company does, and we did it. So I think your focus on having one top line question, and that is, I think, also really hard to identify and work on, is something that a lot of companies fail at. And as they grow and they get bigger, everybody kind of starts to splinter, or it's really important that we look at thing X and we're looking at thing Y, but X and Y, and then it's X, Y, and Z, and then it's A, B, and then you just make this massively complicated thing. And I think you hit on, when you hit outside of the pattern, or I call it like a rut, that's where everybody understands and like culture is there. But when you start trying to do things outside of that, people have no frame of reference or template. And in our current society, you get pushed out because the algorithm also doesn't know how to treat you. So unless you're inflammatory, you're not, the algorithm will serve you what you want, and it'll also serve you what you don't want to keep you engaged, depending upon what we're doing. But if you're not in that sphere of like, we don't know how to feel about it, you're just invisible. And a lot of people, you know, trying to get discovered on social media or whatever, you know, hit these problems where it's like, most of the people that you're following, of millions of followers or who are like famous, got lucky, or they were there super early on. Yeah. Some people are pretty good at hacking the algorithm and growing. But when you mention like venture capitalists specifically, like I would venture to guess that 99.9% of them have no clue what you're talking about. They don't even like, it doesn't even register. Most venture capitalists are really shit at business and also shit at tech, but that's a whole nother conversation. So I think it's really interesting. And I totally agree with you that if you prove out what you're working on, I think you've hit on something very large. My biggest concern when I hear that is just thinking through, it's like, because it's in it, but it's not different. But if you don't understand the current context, which most people don't, they're just operating in it, right? They're in the algorithm, they don't even know it's there. Then they don't know how to get out of it. But the idea that you're limiting time on platform as a product person, and like, I don't know, maybe I'm a recovering product person now, but as a product person, I never use that as a metric because I think it's a very bad metric. Just because people are using your product doesn't mean they're using it well or they're getting value from it. Or maybe they fell asleep and watched the YouTube video, right? Oh, well, look at all this engagement we have from this person. No, they're sleeping, right? Yeah. So it's not necessarily even a good measurement, but keeping people off your product or making it in such a way that people exit is a strategy that has gone by the wayside in our country, and I would say even the world. This is a little bit of an aside, but I was reading an article about therapeutic intervention, right? So everybody has a therapist now. And medicine somewhere along the lines forgot that every intervention you do to somebody, you give them a pill, you give them a cast, you give them, mental health, there's always positive and negative effects for everything you do. And we typically prescribe things that have low negative effect, or we understand the negative effect in, like, chemo is a great example. You get really sick for a while, you probably get over the cancer. That's the benefit. Most people say, yep, let's do that. Sounds like a good plan. But with like therapy specifically, there's a couple prominent people who are really starting to raise the alarm bells of like therapy is supposed to be temporary. It's supposed to give you skills to cope or to get you through a trauma or some sort of an event. But then it becomes a crutch if you're on it all the time. And just like having a real crutch in real life, you know, that side of your body will weaken. Or if you're using two, your arms will be strong, but your legs will weaken. There's always a negative impact. And we don't ever talk about any of that anymore.
Yeah.
And that, so it's really refreshing to hear that. And it's also, I want to underscore this point where it's just because something has a negative consequence doesn't mean it's the end of the world or bad. But in order to make an informed decision, in order to be a balanced person or society, you also have to look at the possible bad. You don't want to dwell in it, and then people get stuck, right? So I think that's a really cool idea. It's also like really strange to hear for a company, right?
Just breaking everything.
Yeah.
I really like that that train of thought. It makes me think, I used to work in medical research actually, so I really like when people bring medicine back into it. This feels comfortable. So I worked in a medical nonprofit that was focused on rare diseases. And the interesting thing about medical nonprofits is their goal is to cure the disease, which would render the nonprofit obsolete.
Exactly.
Which I just love. I'm like, the purpose is to succeed so much that this organization doesn't need to exist anymore.
Right.
There's something so beautiful about that, of having a clear goal that is beyond profit. I mean, it's a nonprofit, so it's kind of built into that. But like, if we do this well, then like we wouldn't need to exist, right? If in a crazy world and like the biggest vision, if we can empower and mobilize enough people that we help everybody become more intentional and they won't need the tools. We solve climate change and like the loneliness epidemic and anxiety, like all of these issues that are kind of mixed together in what we're doing. If we fix that, we won't need to exist. Right. And that is success because the problem is fixed. Yep. And what is the problem with social media? Like as a startup founder, people constantly ask you, what's the problem? What's the problem? What's your solution? Like, how are you going to get there? And I think that's so interesting. I don't know what problem current social platforms are solving. It seems like they're trying to connect people, but they don't actually. You follow mostly strangers. You don't actually talk to them. Yeah, you could get to talk to your family and stalk them on Facebook, but it doesn't actually help you. Maybe early days when you were friending each other and that actually meant something, but that seems to have gotten lost along the way. So what is the core problem that if the problem you're trying to solve is finished, you don't need to exist anymore? And you can go start another company. That seems to be what everybody does. You start one company, you start 7 more, and then you become like a fancy serial entrepreneur. But I just love that. There is a terminal point in which you are so successful that you would actually shut down the company, which also, I assume, venture capitalists would not like.
It's interesting. One, just self-plug, I'm a third-time founder. So I'm a serial
recovering.
I'm a recovering founder and an active founder.
It's a safe space.
I know it's a mental illness. But, I want to touch on the loneliness epidemic, but before that, I think this is really funny. This is such like the old idea coming to new again, because in America, like I think it was 1912, to have a company had to have a limited duration. It was illegal to have this perpetual, and this is something this whole country has forgotten. America was founded to get rid of kings who were just forever rulers, and then their kid was the ruler, and then their kid's kid, and then their kid's kid, and this whole dynasty idea was something that we rebuked. The same was true for government. We put term limits on people, right? You can't just be in the Senate and the House are a little different. But like the only branch of government that was supposed to be forever was the Supreme Court, because that was the idea was you take out influence of elections. You don't want the court to be political. You want them to rule. And here we are. But the corporation specifically, the Rockefellers actually retooled that out of Delaware, I believe it was. It was either Delaware or New Jersey. My history is a little fuzzy on that. But it used to be like, you'd form a bridge company to build a bridge. It was Bridgeco. And then when the bridge was built, it was done. And then it dissolved, and then everybody went away. And the idea behind it was so that you couldn't soak up all of this capital. And then there's I think a lot of people don't understand in capitalism, if you have capital, aka money, simplistically, at a certain point, that money makes money faster than you can spend it, or faster than anybody could take it from you.
Yeah.
And that's the problem with like billionaires, is once you hit a certain scale, like Bill Gates can't give away his money fast. He's still gaining, hundreds of millions of dollars a year, and he's giving all this money to charity, because at a certain point, the equation just breaks. Mm-hmm. And people don't really understand that. And we used to know that. And we explicitly designed the system. And so hearing, your intention is to like basically have a dissolvable company as like a new idea isn't really a new idea, but it's also something that I think needs to come back into our society again. And as you said, in a nonprofit space, it's way more common for a nonprofit to dissolve once they've figured it out, right? And again, the nonprofit space was kind of an answer to this. Well, it doesn't make sense to have a corporation, and the charity model needs to work. So most nonprofits typically operate as charities, but now we have these nonprofit corporations, and it's kind of that same thing where it's like a lot of them also don't go away. I'd love to see the statistics on when a nonprofit dissolves, other than insolvency. And I would say it's much more prominent than corporations, but it's also probably like an amazingly small percentage of them.
And that dissolving as a success, not like as a failure.
Yeah,
I dissolved my nonprofit because we were so successful that we're moving on to a different problem rather than like we failed.
And when in town here, we have the Willamette River Keepers. And there was an interesting piece I read, I think it was about a year ago now, but the whole idea behind them was the Willamette River was this toxic wasteland because Portland shipbuilding, all this fun stuff, and they wanted to clean it up. And one of the founders wrote an article about like 20 something years later, 30 years, whatever it was, he's like, we basically did it. But then there's all this ecological problems that they're finding out that yes, they made these massive improvements and they kind of set out on their goal, but it's like one of those, like it's never done. As long as people are still using the riverways, like there's always something to happen. But they kind of wound that down a little bit. And I think it's still going now, but I forget what the river paddle event that used to happen to raise awareness did shut down, because they were like, the whole point of this was to raise awareness about the problems that we have and to make it usable. And now it's usable, so we're not doing it anymore. And everybody freaked out. Don't take away my river run, or whatever it was called, right? So do you have any ideas, or have you thought through like how you hedge against this? Like, I feel like once you kind of put the idea out there, you can't kill it, right? And this idea of the corporation lasting forever is now out there. And people then attach onto them, and we can't get rid of it because, and then we'll self-rationalize a million fucking reasons, which I think directly also relates to some of the problems that you're trying to solve, right? Is like, the cocaine's bad, but it makes me feel good, so I do it. Right?
You do more and more and more,
and then and then that's how you develop a habit or an addiction, right? It's like it's now out of your control, but you're still doing it. And everyone, or a lot of people in mental health will say, well, you just don't do it. Well, you're addicted, right? That's not how it works. If it was that easy, then nobody would be addicted to anything.
And I think addiction is actually an interesting, I hear a lot of like, oh, we're going to use, I'm going to build this platform. This is other people saying this. Like, we're going to use addictive tactics, but for good. And I'm like, I
love the targeted ads. They're wonderful. I love that hand scratcher. I don't know. I don't do shopping.
Like it's either providing benefit or like there's other platforms that are like educational, but like we're also using the same addictive tactics, but like for something good. I don't think we should be addicted to anything. I think addiction is an unhealthy way of interacting with like, I don't think you should be addicted to broccoli. Like that's an unhealthy. If you're waking up, you're like, oh my God, I need broccoli. Like that's not.
Gotta get my hit.
I'm like, I feel like addiction is just a little bit too strong of an emotion. Like let's chill a little bit and just be like, again, intentional. I think also what you're hitting on is just like, again, this is the idea of sustainability, which has a very strong anchoring in like environmental sustainability, but it's a broader concept, right? Sustaining over time. So I talk about financial sustainability, but there's this aspect of an even bigger picture version of this is like, how do, capitalism is not sustainable. Like, constant growth is not sustainable. So there's whole movements talking about like degrowth. How do we grow, GDP of countries or companies in a sustainable way? And this is the idea that like constantly this, like doubling, tripling, profits like is just not realistic. And as you said, like at some point, maybe you solve the original problem, but because you have to keep growing, you now are taking on more problems. So now you're like, oh my God, we have all this money. Let's go develop robots that do something, you know, like then we're like, oh, we can do all this other shit. And it had nothing to do with the original company, but now we have money, we can do that. And again, I don't know if, you know, what's the right decision here. I'm not the, you know, the right person to preach on this in any sort of shape or form. But I just feel like it shouldn't be this out of control, constant chasing either more finances or more problems to take on. Again, the idea of sustainability at its core is an intentional, slow pace in which you feel like you understand why you're doing things and the reasoning behind it, and you feel like it's like sustainable over time. You're not sprinting on a 400, you know, like constantly, which is exhausting. And then you need more and more cocaine and caffeine. And you're like, man, I think people are tired. Like talking to people are exhausted and burnt out. Everybody's so stressed out. And I think that our just current lifestyle and platforms are just driving this like shorter attention span, shorter connections, you know, like now we can't have hour meetings, now we have 15-minute meetings because we don't have time to talk anymore, you know, like then we're gonna have 5-minute
then
meetings.
I can have 4 meetings an hour instead of 1.
Oh my God, amazing. So like
4x productive, right?
and this is a interesting.
I grew my meetings by 4 times.
Yeah, you're so productive. And it's interesting because like part of our platform is like goal setting and reaching milestones, but trying to keep that in a healthy way so it's not like toxic productivity. Oh my God, I'm so amazing. I'm doing all these things and I'm reaching all these goals. And like, I think there's also an aspect of that of let's more of like almost like a life coaching approach, which, you know, I know rubs some people the wrong way, but there is a core of understanding your baseline of like where you are, what do you have at your disposal in terms of like your finances, but also what are you bringing to the table, your skill set, your interests, like where are you at now? Really understanding your baseline, understanding what your success vision for your future, for your, you know, kids or your community, whatever is important to you. And then, you know, trying to understand how you get from baseline to success and helping you move forward. It could take you 2 decades. Like, that's fine. It doesn't have to be like, oh my God. And also making sure that you're supported with your own data, first of all, because you're producing just like a crap ton of data all the time, and that's never given back to you, and that's frustrating. Your own data, your own capabilities are really like you're able to think through all of the resources and actually put them into use, but also supported by other people. There's a ton of people that are interested in the same things and maybe are interested in pursuing the same goals, but there's not really an easy way for us to learn and connect with each other to be able to support each other on our pathways to wherever you're going. So whether it's starting a business or having kids or being more sustainable, like even something like easy as like buying an EV there's so many things to consider. And just like that one decision is so overwhelming for people. So if there was a way of, oh, your neighbor just got an EV, like learn what he knew so you don't make the same mistakes. Even that kind of learning, I think, is really missing. And that's an aspect that we didn't really touch on yet, but we really want to lean into, which is what I did for my dissertation for my PhD. So I really am a huge dork on this aspect of lived experience knowledge sharing that can help support personal growth that then leads to societal benefit, which again exists in some ways online. I mean, there's Reddit, you know, where people dump all of their experiences, but it's not as, you know, there's not perfect metadata that can help actually guide you to the exact right person that you need to talk to. Right. And then maybe, again, push you off the platform being like, great, go talk to this person, go meet with them for coffee like a human, and don't like message them on our platform. Get off your phone. Go do something in real life. Go visit a community garden if you're interested in gardening. Go do more things, get out there, and how this relates to everything you are doing, and you can actually track your progress over time across all of these different areas of your life.
The baseline, I think, is probably the most important aspect of this, and I think for people who aren't into science or math or performance measurement, management, that kind of thing, that might be a little bit of a foreign concept. But it's effectively devising a way to understand where you're at. And like, I think an easy way would be like you open the fridge and there's nothing in there. Okay, your baseline is 0 groceries. You go get groceries, right?
Yeah.
And you get your milk and your eggs and whatever it is you eat. And then as, you know, the milk goes down, you get a gallon, it's a half gallon. Okay, I need to get more. And then you can understand that. Whereas when it comes to just normal life, that data exists, I promise. And a lot of other companies probably know all this already about you, which is why you get the ad for toilet paper on Amazon when it's about time to get new toilet paper. Wow, it's not magic. They just understand. So I think that's really cool. It's a hard thing to do, but that is then how you yourself understand how your progress is. And then you, of course, can benchmark, you know, across other people or communities and that sort of thing. And this is exactly how they sell ads, right? So I guess folks at home know you're not nearly as unique as you think you are. And you cohort, which is just a fancy way of saying grouping with other people. And then they target you and sell you stuff. And so when you're on Instagram or searching the web and you're on the news site and they present you that ad, and people tell me, oh, they're listening to me. I'm like, no, you're just really predictable. And you're in a cohort where they know that that's what people are looking at. And so they say, yeah, we'll serve it to you.
Yeah. Like everything you click, everything you look at, like how long you're looking at it, you didn't click on it. Like again, social dilemma does a really good job of illustrating this. But it is kind of insane of how much information about us is out there. But again, it's used to sell us stuff that we probably don't actually need. It's that, like, I just keep coming to this interesting question. What if that's not the outcome? What can we do with that information? There's so much data. And we think about this on companies, right? Like companies have data dashboards and they, you know, look at all their metrics.
That's how you grow,
like,
right?
That's how you grow as a company. But that doesn't happen to us as people. We don't have that data. It just disappears into thin air. But like, what if we can access that data? Like, what could you learn about your own, you know, shopping patterns or what you like, or, you know, like we get so much of like different apps, you know, track different things. Like people have Fitbits that track your steps. You can look at how much time you spend on Instagram, but it's all so divided and so just like surface level. It's not in any way connected, you know, processed into something that's comprehensible and actionable for you. That is just so frustrating for me. Like it's out there and we don't get access to it.
Yeah, and it's already happening because that's, again, how they sell you stuff. Yeah. Are you familiar with donut economics?
Yeah. This comes up a lot. Yeah.
Because I'll put that in the show notes for folks. But TLDR on that is that the economy is the way it is because we measure what we measure. And so there's measurement bias, which is when you measure something, you upset the thing you're measuring. But then there's like, I don't know that that's actually a principle, but it's just the antithesis of measurement. If you're not measuring it, you're not looking at it. And anybody who's ever worked at a company or been in charge of people or whatever, you know, your quarterly management, your weekly productivity outputs, how many phone calls are we getting, how many customers are we servicing, how many sales, those are all just measurements. And the principle behind donut economics is that because we haven't chosen to measure the impact of, you know, the amount of energy something takes or the amount of carbon it produces or the harm that it causes an individual, in the case of Instagram, fuck you, Facebook, Meta, that it's invisible. And so step one, and kind of like what you're saying with baselining, is like you just have to measure it and understand where it even is. And maybe it's fine, right? I don't think anyone's going to say that, you know, we're going to predict something we don't even know about. But I think people would be incredibly disturbed to understand how many data points of information an average company has. Like, this is a few years ago now, but Target, everybody knows Target, put out a new ad model where they were sending pregnancy-related things to young women who were pregnant, and somebody sued them because they didn't know they were pregnant yet. And they were pregnant and they were getting targeted by this and they got creeped out. And I think they might have been a minor and the parents were mad, but like.
Yeah, it was a minor.
Yeah. And that's just Target. This isn't Google. This isn't Meta. This isn't Apple. I mean, Apple says they don't, and we'll give them the benefit of the doubt, but this is just, you know, a store. And yes, it's a big corporation. There's a lot of smart people who work at Target, but it's like people don't even understand like how much further it goes. The social dilemma is a good starting point. But you talk about when you say addicted to, like I was talking, I think it was with Michelle, I rant about Instagram all the time. And people say, I'm addicted to it. Like it's like a positive, or it's like, we've disempowered the word, right? Nobody should be addicted and nobody should be celebrating that. But you were also, we brought up loneliness. And I do want to touch on this because I think this is an incredible, huge problem that, again, no one's talking about, because the subset of people who I think fall into this category are by definition not talking with a lot of other people about stuff. But where are your thoughts on that? Or like, where do you see like an app like this helping? There's a mental health coefficient potentially there, but as you were saying earlier too, we call it social networking or social media. It's not media and it's not social. Sitting on your phone and staring at it is not social.
Yeah.
And I think I've said this before on the podcast too. I've gotten to the point in my real life where I'm with somebody, and if they're on the phone, I will just be like, hey, I'm here in person. You want to talk to me or not? Right? Like, I'm spending my time here, and if people don't want to participate with me in real life, then I just get up and leave. I'm at dinner or at a party or wherever, and people think that's rude, and I think it's insanely rude to be, if you're texting someone back, or like, life happens for sure, but like, I've been with people where they're literally like scrolling Instagram on their phone, and I'm like, we're at a dinner.
Yeah.
Put the fucking thing away. And like, yeah, they're probably addicted, and I'm an asshole for like not enabling their addiction or whatever, but we don't talk about this nearly enough. And I think the loneliness epidemic is directly correlated to the amount of social crap that people are exposed to. And as I was saying earlier, I'm literally seeing this algorithm in real life, and people are like, we're in a post-information world where the information that you receive through your Instagram is so micro-targeted to you that my experience is going to be radically different. But we all think it's Instagram, so everyone knows, because I get it.
Yeah. I mean, not even Instagram, but Google search results are not the same for everybody, which still blows people's minds. And, there's a whole aspect of like misinformation spreads so much faster than information, because it's targeted. I also used to study misinformation spread. So that's a whole...
And it evokes emotion too, right?
Yeah.
It's like, I'm mad at the thing that I'm supposed to be mad at because the algorithm fed it to me.
Yeah.
And so I'm more apt to share it, which also then spreads it and be like, did you see how fucking crazy this thing was? Oh my God, it's fucking crazy. Did you see how fucking crazy? And then it,
And that's like even the news cycle, it's very boring to be like, nothing terrible happened today.
Right.
We're like, okay. Everything.
The world's still turning.
The world's still turning. No, nobody died today. And, just it's tough to fight that for sure. Yeah, loneliness. It's ironic to call it social media. I call it social networks just because I'm really interested in like the underlying, network that is there. And again, social media is the fact that it's, video and image based, which again, does that help people is my question. Do we need to have this infinite scroll wall on a platform? And I don't think we do. So that's why I don't know if we want people to upload videos and pictures, because again, then it becomes very like, let's look at,
it's more
like
engaging.
People
We're visual people.
Yeah, but it has so much harm through Instagram of, for women, it's like, let's look at everybody's who's using all these filters, and that's make us feel bad about our bodies. And
and on that point specifically, anybody who was alive in the 90s probably remembers the supermodel craze where, anorexic women were being paraded around as the creme de la creme, which is a French phrase for saying good, but were pedestaled and pointed to. And then there was this epidemic of eating disorders, and like heroin chic was a thing that people, especially the Pacific Northwest and the alt-rock and all this kind of stuff. And then society was like, we figured it out, right? It used to be you go to the grocery store, there was all these, anorexic women basically on the covers. And we found that it was really warping young women. And we said no more. And they took them, I remember when they took, I think it was 17, was taken out of libraries across the nation because they're like, this is doing far more harm than good. Yeah. I believe 17 got its shit together and figured it out. Teen Vogue was another one. They guys seemingly got their shit together. And then Instagram comes along and we pretend like it's not the exact same thing.
It's worse
because
there's video
worse,
filters,
right? Because
it's so hard to tell the difference.
I've worked in mental health and with body dysmorphia, people tend to have, I guess just real quick for folks who have no idea what we're talking about, people with, I'll just blanket label it as a mental health condition, will have the way they see themselves is not the way that other people would see them, and they tend to fixate on something. So if you have body dysmorphia, you might think your arms are too big or your head is too big or whatever it is, whereas most people would say you probably look normal, and then eventually you become clinical in that, you're starving yourself or whatever, self-harm, there's all sorts of stuff, but they don't even realize it. And like I've mentioned this with folks before too, it's like if we go back to Teen Vogue in the 90s, it's like we've literally personalized that cover for every single young girl or young boy. Young boys are also not immune from this at all. but we've personalized that cover for them specifically. And I think that that's just completely unconscionable. And I don't think people even can relate, because magazines are things that used to take trees and make a product called paper from them. And then people would read them.
You'd have to go to the store.
Yeah, and you'd have to
physically
you'd have to
buy
seek it out.
Yeah.
Or you would, but now it's like literally in your pocket. And it's, you know, so-and-so mentioned this. Now you're getting it pushed to you, and then you start seeking it out. And then if you don't participate, I hear this a lot from parents, if your kids aren't participating in this, then they get socially ostracized in real life and also digital life, because they're not a part of the cult or whatever you want to call it. But it gets all kind of tied together. And I know it's probably hard for a lot of folks to follow this, because they're doing something that's probably not sitting in a room talking and really paying attention, which is part of the problem. But it's all really interrelated. And I think that's really what you're trying to accomplish, right? Is like just providing people an awareness to that, creating a measurement, a baseline for folks to understand where it's at. And if they want to change something, or potentially have maybe recommendations on how to improve something that you would know about based on that information. That's kind of the idea in a nutshell, right?
Yeah. And just, I think post-COVID, I think a lot of people still are recovering. Also, just like, how do we talk to humans again in person? And eye contact is scary. And just like a layering of issues between a whole generation growing up of, being so digitally native that they... I'm involved with a lot of like university activities, so I hear a lot of kids that have ideas for startups, and it's all around social media, and it's all around how terrible it is. So this is like a very strong pain point for the younger generation, especially, but I think everybody is kind of becoming more aware of it. It doesn't help us connect with people. Literally, I've heard startups being pitched of like, how do I know if somebody wants to talk to me? Let's build a device that helps me know, like it lights
That's
up.
terrifying.
You know, it lights up, if somebody wants to talk to me or not, which I heard you say is terrifying. I kind of had a similar reaction. I'm like, oh my gosh, like some things I think don't need to be solved with technology. We're exploring whether this approach to a tech platform can actually solve this problem. I'm open to finding out that the actually like blocking all social media is actually the answer, and we will achieve the same guiding question by not building an alternative social platform. Like, I am open to that, and I think that's also very important to keep in mind. But some things I'm like, those are just basic human skills of being able to maintain eye contact and have a conversation, which I think causes people anxiety because we're just not used to it between COVID, and social media, and just we've forgotten how to connect with people. So it's a question that I have. Can we use social network platforms to actually help us facilitate that? If we are actually able to connect people, and prep them of like, oh, you guys have the same interest, same baseline, like go have coffee. So it's maybe less scary. There's at least like an introduction, almost like dating platforms or something like that. But again, like taking it offline and kind of helping facilitate better connection. And then there's the social learning aspect. I think everybody, that as they're doing whatever they're doing, their jobs, their hobbies, their, buying things, like they have this lived experience that they've learned something from this process. They know more than they knew before they did that thing. And that information, if I were to dork out for a second, it's called tacit knowledge. So like your lived experience, that is incredibly valuable information. And if other people can tap into that, it helps them. So there's also this not only connecting of, hey, let's go grab coffee, be friends, but also supporting each other through knowledge, through being able to like, this is what I wish I knew. I got an EV. I wish I knew all of the people in Portland that are about to get a Nissan Leaf, and I would tell them everything I know about Nissan Leafs. Right. I don't know where how can I find them? Like literally in the specific instance, there is no place, no way I can possibly find them. And I wish I knew what I know now. I probably would have made the same decision because it's a nice car, but it's not, there's no chargers for it, And I've tried to specifically, I'm like, if I knew this, 6 months ago, could I find this information? I specifically looked for it. I could not find this information. I have a PhD in research. I know how to look for stuff. I couldn't find this information. It is buried, but I know this. Everybody else who has a Nissan Leaf knows this. People who are in the dealership right now don't know this. That's infuriating to me. So can we also incorporate this aspect of like communities, I think, are a little bit drifted. We don't feel embedded in the places we live in. At least as young people, I think people in suburbs more that are grounded, have kids, own their home, feel a little bit more grounded in communities than a lot of us more transient folks. But I think people are very hungry to connect, which is we're sitting in a co-working space, like I go to a gym in which I hang out for hours and hours a day. People just are hungry for more human contact, more connection, more feeling of community, even physical contact. Portland has cuddle parties because people are just like, I need to hug some people. We're just so incredibly disconnected from other people. And there's something very deeply human about just needing other people that I think people are I think that's partially what is causing just like depression and anxiety and feelings of isolation, because people don't know how to connect. And we're so used to connecting through algorithms that without that, how do I know if you want to talk to me?
Yeah.
You have to
My
you
pin
have to
will
ask.
glow green.
Yeah, no, literally, it was a device that would light up, and I was like, oh my, I would hate to live in a world that we would have to be guided, by a light up thing if you want to talk to me. We need to know to make eye contact and read social cues. That's beyond beyond tech.
And it's terrifying though too, is like when I go out into IRL in the real world. Like even out at a restaurant or something, like there'll be a toddler on an iPad. When in probably 10 years ago, that wasn't even possible because the iPad didn't exist. And you maybe had like a portable TV or DVD player. Like portable screens have existed for too long, but like that has now become just main stage, I think, because that's what adults do too. And I understand from people who have children that, you have sometimes no choice but to pacify the damn thing that's screaming, and I get that. But it also used to be okay. Like there'd be a screaming kid in a restaurant, and you'd be like, yep, they're like 2 and they're having a problem, and the parents would take them outside and calm them down and bring them back in, and you're like, okay, it's fucking, it sucked, but it's normal. And now I also feel like that people have this over amplified perception of what everybody cares about too, because it's like, because social media is constantly telling you all this stuff that is either relevant or irrelevant to you. I think people have a over sensitive perception of just how many fucks people give.
Yeah, everything's externally validated, right? Everything's valuable if other people have liked it fast enough.
Yeah, and I mean, this is like the social media versus reality kind of meme, but it's also a very real problem in that what you're seeing on social media by and large isn't real. Especially the quote unquote influencers or these professional people who are getting paid tons and tons of money to have a professional photo shoot on the perfect moment and time in the beach that they spent 3 weeks at to get the right amount of sun and clouds, is not what it even used to be 5 or 10 years ago, where I went on vacation and I shot a crappy photo and put it on Facebook, right?
Yeah.
But again, I think that's another thing people don't even understand, and it's pushing that baseline threshold of being socially awkward is fine. Right. Very few people are actually comfortable meeting new people randomly. There are the people out there who, and you know who you are,
and it's okay,
who thrive on it, right? And they just this what they get on, and there's I think even more people that appear to be very comfortable with that, but there's a nerve, and that's okay, right? We've gotten away from. I was talking with some folks one of my travels, and they were telling me about how nervous they get about something else. I'm like, that's fine. Like, it's fine to be nervous. And that's usually a good thing, right? Because your body is trying to prep you for something that is unknown or uncomfortable, and being able to work through that. And I think I figured this out at an early age, doing a lot of stuff in front of random people, right? I was in plays, and I was in sports, and I was in all this shit where it's like, it's a little nerve-wracking to go out on stage the first time when the curtain opens, and everybody should have that experience. And there are people who just absolutely will never, ever want to do anything like that ever again, but now you've learned. And until you do it, you don't know. So I find this platform idea really fascinating, and I'm very interested to see how it develops. So two questions I typically close with are, is there anything that I should have asked that I didn't?
Ooh, that's a good question. Nothing comes to mind right now.
perfect interview.
You did a great job.
And secondarily, is there anything that you're reading, or I generally broaden this to consuming, that you want to share with folks that you think people should be interested in? I'll put it in the show notes if there's links or whatever.
I mean, I think we did a very strong plug for The Social Dilemma as the documentary.
I'll give Tristan a call later and tell him I want some royalties.
Oh my gosh, if you know Tristan, I need to talk to you. Nothing else really comes to mind. I have a podcast as well. Yeah. If you're interested in that, I can plug that. It's called Along the Same Lines. Also, kind of along the same lines. I did not mean that. I kept saying that, so I'm like, I'm gonna call that the podcast. But I mean, my core kind of mission in life is the same across all of my projects, and I have way too many. I think 6 at this point. Is just like different ways of like helping people connect and understand and learn from lived experience is kind of I'm a very one-trick pony. That's my trick. That's everything I do is going to come down to that. So it's a new podcast. So if you're inclined to listen to more podcasts, especially listening to my voice in this room, actually, most of the time.
Ooh, there you go.
So that I can plug that. But no, I think if you'd like to follow along on our journey, feel free to connect with me directly. We will be, releasing a beta of the platform at some point, hopefully in the future. So if this sounds cool, follow along. We might be doing some sort of like crowdfunding campaign and onboarding initial users, or if you want to test out and give us feedback. I really want to build this. I hope this came across of like intentionally with community support. So like we want to build something that's useful. So we need a lot of input from a lot of different folks and a lot of different voices. And right now we're very grounded in Portland, which is a very particular population. Yep. And I'm trying to get a little bit outside of that because assuming that Portland is weird on many levels. But yeah, just need to hear from as many different people as possible to make sure that we are building something that's useful and can actually have a lot of impact. So follow along on the website. You can sign up even for our waiting list.
Cool. Yeah, we'll have the co-host plug that, and then I'll put it in the show notes as well. I know I say I usually end with 2 questions. I have a third now. And folks listening are probably like, of course. How do you avoid burnout then? Because you've talked through a lot of stuff. You're working on what I would probably consider as an impossible problem. It's not that it's not solvable. It's just so complex and large that it's a multi-decade probably right at best, which maybe it's a really good company idea. But yeah, how do you hedge against burnout, or how do you are you burned out? I talk to a lot of people now more about this, and it seems like people are more aware of it now, but they're not aware of it until it's too late, and they're just like done. Right. And then there's this massive life change they have to make because they're just so far into burnout, which if that's what you got to do, that's what you got to do. But yeah, so what's your secret?
That's a good question. It's not a secret. I actually have a newsletter called Nevertheless on LinkedIn and now on Substack, in which I basically channel all of my fears and anxieties and discomfort into being a founder, into doodle and word form. Multimodal, yeah. It's been an interesting journey. I've been full-time almost a year now, and it's been much harder psychologically than I would have expected. I knew obviously building a company is hard because you have no money, and see previous note, no users, etc. Our team,
everything is a problem and it's critical.
Everything is a problem and it's all your fault at all times,
and you have to solve it.
And you're doing a bad job, doing the job of 15 people that you're absolutely not qualified for. I'm like, I don't know legal stuff or HR or what, just finance. I don't know. So you're just basically sucking at everything at the same time. So it's hard practically, but it's also as a founder, especially if you're a solo founder, especially if you're a first-time solo founder, and maybe also female, which not to bring in gender, but there's some aspects of we were not conditioned in some ways as are some male counterparts of being very confident about what we're doing and being comfortable in rooms where we're one of 3 women and everybody's like, why are you here? It's difficult. I will say there's a lot of people out there that feel the same way. So I've found it really helpful to just share, my thoughts and everything very publicly, which has been very terrifying, but gotten a lot of good responses of people just being like, thank you, I don't feel crazy. Again, my one trick, connecting with people, community, sharing lived experience, because I just feel like this is infuriating to me, which I think I'm just driven by just rage. I'm so annoyed at things and I'm like, I'm going to fix it. Just the fact that I am not the first person who started a company, and that feeling of what am I doing?
Breaking news.
Starting a company is hard, but I'm not the first person to go through this. It's hard. You feel like an imposter. I have a PhD. That doesn't help. I still feel like I have absolutely no idea what I'm doing most days, and I'm probably making the wrong decisions and failing at everything. And you have to just kind of learn to sit in that, and that's okay. And you have to find ways that are outside of that replenish your energy levels. I have a very strict fitness routine. I need that. I need to take time off. I cannot work 24/7. And when you're working for yourself, and again, it's your startup, it's your baby, there's a tendency to work 24 hours. I'm like, weekends, I can get work done. I don't have meetings. Like, I work at night. I'm like, 3 a.m., perfect. No Slack notifications. Let's get some stuff done. Everybody is different. I cannot wake up at 4 a.m. and work, for 12 hours. I have to sleep more. I work at 3 a.m. That's perfect for me. You really need to find what is sustainable over time. This is, again, as you said, this is a long journey. Like, there's some sprints, there's some light jogs, sometimes you're crawling, but over time you're moving for a long period of time. You need to figure out what is success again for you as a founder. Do you need a ton of money right away? Do you want to build a company that everybody's really happy? Do you want to build a company with your best friend? Do you want to be a solo founder and really own that? What is important to you, and what can you actually sustain on a day-to-day basis? Because in these early stages, again, you don't have anything else except your vision and your ability to wake up and decide that you have a company today. Because if you decide to not have a company today, your company doesn't really exist because nothing's happening. You have to get up. You have to send emails. You have to pitch to people all the time, constantly. What do you do? Oh my God. You have to do that all the time. And you need to find a way to make that it helps you. Ideally, it would replenish your energy. Ideally, you have conversations with people that are so excited about what you're doing that they actually give you energy, and you can use that then. Sometimes it's an energy give, sometimes it's an energy suck. You have to find a balance there. I'm really grateful for all the volunteers that we have. We actually have a program called the Residency that's meant to support people that are switching industries or maybe early stage that, we do a work trade. They work a little bit on some project that we have. They get a resume piece and, an experience in an early stage startup. That's been incredibly rewarding for both sides. We get, people to help build aspects of our platform. They get a ton of experience, and they get to find out, do they want to work in an early stage startup? Right. Early stage startups are chaos. Yep. People don't know that. So, if you're a newly graduated person and you don't know where you want to work, this is an interesting experience. Do you love this or do you hate it? Do you need to know what's going to happen? Do you need to know where you're going to be working on tomorrow? Or do you, like the chaos of this life? So I've been really grateful that we've had a ton of very talented, passionate people volunteering with us, some for a month, some have been, with us for over a year. And just, we meet and we get into this creative, amazing brainstorm, process of we're building something cool. How are this going to work? Let's talk about how it's, the back end's going to work and how's it going to look. And that is what gives me a lot of energy. Sometimes I can just wake up and just be yeah, let's go. Sometimes it takes talking to my team. Sometimes it's talking to your partner that you need to sometimes you're just dead on the floor and they have to pick you up and take you and wrap you in a blanket and give you some ice cream and just know that that's okay. You can give up on that day. Next day is a new opportunity. Sometimes you need 3 days and you need to take that time if you do, because sometimes it's just hard. And what keeps you going is you just make the decision to keep going. And you can make a different decision. This is also not for everybody. It is hard and most startups fail. But the idea is that you might make more progress than the last person, And again, if you can share that lived experience with someone and help them, like the next person, learn something, then eventually we'll build something great. That was a very long-winded answer, but I have a lot of thoughts on this as well. So
maybe someone will make an app
helpful
to help with all that.
Maybe that's one of the things. You know, we're so topic area agnostic that I'm like, yeah, that would be amazing. Let's connect founders also on the platform.
Cool. Well, thanks so much for coming out or stopping by, I guess, and we'll talk to you later.
Thank you so much.
You can find us at 38.com. It's like the word create, but with a 3 instead of the C. As always, we encourage you to listen, watch, do. We'll see you next time. You can support this podcast at patreon.com/38 or at ko-fi.com/38. Thanks for listening.